Prof. Mnkandla has walked all the levels of the academic steps, and this is actually the last one before being Professor Emeritus Prof. Mnkandla, which shall happen when we retired. Hopefully we shall continue doing the good work. And for us as the university and on behalf of the university executive management, these are moments that we very much pride ourselves in, the moments through which we demonstrate the work that we've done as a university and where we showcase the work of our professors, and in particular, for me as the Vice Principal for Research, how our researchers have actually demonstrated the work that they've done over many years. For a colleague to be a professor, a full professor, that is a lot of work goes into that. We pride ourselves in such work as the work that Prof. Mnkandla has done. Despite him being in the computing field, looking through his contribution, it's very heartening that it's not just only on the engineering side of the field, but it is software that speaks to social issues. It is software that is generated looking at an assess that looks at the risks that we're exposed to and looking at what we could do to improve the work that we're doing. And for that, we are appreciative of the contribution that he's made, the contribution that is born out of our local challenges, out of our local experiences, and therefore a contribution towards knowledge, because as a professor, we expect professors to contribute in generating knowledge and not just only hold titles. If anything, looking at the work of Prof. Mnkandla, I'm proud of the work that he's done, because it indicates a trajectory that he's walked is a trajectory that goes up, and one of the activities that I'm convening is towards looking at ensuring that our professors stay productive, produce quality work, and we consider actually questioning the work that they do quite vigorously, possible to the point of even, stripping them of their professorship should they not produce the work that we expect them to produce.
We pride ourselves in having professors like Professor Mnkandla, who are all-rounded, well-rounded in training students, publishing, and also taking responsibility in community engagement and in academic citizenship within the university and internationally.
My talk this evening, it's focusing on software foul-ups, bleeps, and blunders. We are going to look at what happens when software decides to go wrong, when software doesn't do what it was meant to actually do. I'll start with an introduction and a bit of some background, and then look at software failures with specific examples that you may actually be able to relate to. And then I'll just mention some consequences of software failure and liabilities, the legal issues with software failure, and then solutions to software failure, which is basically the focus of the research that we've been doing. And then I'll talk a bit about software quality management, which is the center of the kind of research that I actually do, and conclude the evening. And I hope that we are going to enjoy. Right, so to start off, computing software is at the center of every technology that is used by human beings for anything. By that, I mean anything. You can't imagine, you can't think of anything any technology that you are using that does not have software. So software is in almost every technology that we use. And then following the software crisis, which started around the 1968 and 1970s and so forth, software engineers up to until now take great interest in software quality, and they ask questions such as, is the software engineered or is it hacked? Do we engineer software or we hack software? So those are the kind of main questions that software engineers ask themselves, and they they want to go out and try and solve those kind of issues. So software engineers know that software development is not just coding skills, but it is actually a medley of craft that is built on technical know-how, soft skills and teamwork, and organizational and self-management skills. So as software engineers, it is important to actually understand that. Software has improved our quality of life. That is a statement that cannot be overemphasized. We know things that we can do with software. Today, you can fly for the next maybe 18 hours or so, depending on where you're going, and the plane is on autopilot. That's software that is flying the plane for you, and the pilot can be enjoying sipping some expensive juices, or the other things that we can't mention if they are allowed to do that, or just drinking water. But and you will be sleeping there and enjoying yourself. And the plane is on autopilot. Sometimes it can even be landed on autopilot, depending on the weather conditions. So that's software, and software has changed a lot of things, including social media. I'm sure we know about social media because as I speak, some of you are tweeting some things, maybe to your friends, maybe about what I'm talking about, or it could actually be something completely different. But we're that connected, and that is software that is doing that. And social media has changed a lot of things, even in family life as well. We are able to connect with our loved ones that are anywhere in the world, and that is software that does that. Talking about social media, I'm reminded of an image that I saw in one of the WhatsApp groups that I subscribed to, and it was a man's face that was heavily bruised. You wouldn't recognize who that was even if you knew the person. So I thought, okay, this is so bad, and the heading there was actually saying another Samsung accident. Then I thought, oh my God, it must be the charging system. Maybe the battery exploded or something like that. I felt sorry for the guy until I read the fine print at the bottom of that image. It said, this time the wife discovered the pin. So those are some of the things that okay, that was not a software accident, but yeah. So developing software requires logical reasoning skills that are from mathematics and problem-solving skills. Right, to define software engineering, I know that some of you have maybe you even have your own definitions that you've come up with, or you've had lots of definitions, or you might be somebody who has never had a definition of software engineering. For the purpose of this lecture, just take it as applying engineering principles to the design, development, testing, deployment, and management of computing software. That's basically what software engineering is all about. A software developer can be involved in any of those tasks that I've listed there. So when we talk about a software developer, we're not just talking about a programmer or a coder, whatever term you use. So they can be starting from requirements elicitation, to design, to coding, project management, testing, and quality management. All those are different roles that software developers are actually involved in. And they work as a team, and they can be involved in any one of those, and depending on the size of the team, it can actually be one or two people that do all those things. Right, so software developers need a complex set of skills in order to develop quality software that is relevant to the customer's needs. That's very, very important. So now, in order for us to just get a feel of the kind of skills that are required by software developers today, in today's world. By the way, in today's world, we live in a world where business is complex. The business requirements change very frequently, and new devices come up, and business wants to connect to that. Even education institutions like UNISA, you'll find our students have so many devices that are different, various devices, and we constantly have to make sure that the software that we use for our education systems can actually be connected to any of those devices. So our software developers today, if you compare with software developers of the years of the 70s, the 80s, and so forth, they are very different in the sense that they need more complex skills. So I've listed a few of those skills there. So they need skills in mobile apps development. We're just talking about our smartphones and other mobile devices, your laptops, and sometimes even the watches. I've seen watches, something that looks so dark as if it's not, I thought, okay, maybe. And then they shake it and it shows you the time, or sometimes it tells the person that you've been standing in this person's office for too long. That's a watch that is telling you that. Or sometimes it says you are running when you are not running. So, okay, that would be a fault. Okay, so mobile app development is a skill that our developers need today, and they also need creative practices in user interface and user interaction, user experience design. So that is very important. So that touches more on the relationship, the HCI, the human-computer interaction design. And then they must be familiar with artificial intelligence and machine learning. Today, we live in a world where you can be sitting in your lounge and watching TV, and next to you is actually a robot that is actually watching TV with you and telling you, oh, this is a boring movie, I've seen this and whatever and so forth. And okay, there are people that do that as well, but robots can do that. Right, so our software developers actually need to be able to understand artificial intelligence and develop software and embed intelligence into these machines that are helping us every day in our lives. So they also need skills in augmented reality apps design and development. Augmented reality used to be something that we used to hear about in the movies, in science fiction movies, but today it is real. Even within UNISA, there are units that are actually trying to incorporate augmented reality into our teaching software. So it's part of our lives. And then they also need special exposure in data analytics and data science. So today, as we sit here, we're generating data, gigabytes upon gigabytes of data. And business needs to make use of that data in order to arrive at decisions that can actually help to meet the requirements of their clients. So data analytics and data science help us in understanding that, and our software developers need to have skills in that. So they must also have knowledge in cyber security. Remember, as technology improves, the criminals also take advantage of technology to commit better crime, smarter crime, and eat from your pockets without paying anything. So our software developers need to actually have skills in those areas. And they must also have excellency in software as a service and cloud computing. So today, you can develop very powerful applications, that are heavy on memory and speed and whatever, without even owning an expensive server or even a supercomputer, but just renting that on the cloud. So, for example, if you know that maybe your business needs a lot of transactions at the end of the month, just for 2 days. 2 out of all the days of the month, your machines will not be able to run those transactions. You can actually rent and pay just for that. So you can have the benefits of a supercomputer just by renting. So our software developers must also understand adoption of digital transformation and Internet of Things. So Internet of Things, this is where we're saying all the devices that we use should actually have an IP address. They must have sensors and so forth, and they'll be sending data, relevant data that you may interpret and use. And digital transformation, it's here. We cannot avoid that. Even governments are now moving away from talking about e-governance. They are now talking about digital governance. So we need to be ready, and our developers must be ready for that one. And they must also have enthusiasm for coding and engineering. Coding, it's I don't want to say complex because that might scare those who want to go into it, but coding requires a lot of accuracy, you must be a details person, because a little comma that is misplaced can crash a plane. So you need to be careful. And then engineering, of course, is about design and accuracy. And in engineering, even a fraction of a micrometer, if it's not measured properly, that can actually destroy the entire design. So that is very important. So our developers need that. And they must also have a flair for programming languages. Programming language, there are so many of them. Some of them are proprietary. They're only used in a particular situation. But a developer must be willing to learn, must be able to learn any language, and they must learn that on their own. You can go on YouTube today and go and learn, but you need that flair in order for you to actually to be able to learn. I remember the days when I started programming as a student. I programmed in a language called QBasic. I can see a few smiles of people that know. Others are just surprised, what is that? They've never heard the name. Right, and then, of course, as an engineering student, I did Fortran. I know the computer science guys were doing, I think they used Pascal as the first language. Today, universities in different environments will probably use Java or C++ if it's relevant as the first programming language that students learn. Right, but we have languages like Python that are taking over because of the data science thing that I mentioned earlier on. So our programmers must also have functional communication skills. Communication is I can't overemphasize that one, it's very, very important, even at social level at home. A home that does not communicate is bound to have serious problems. So imagine in a business, if your developers can only sit and write code and they don't communicate with whoever within the team or with their management and with their clients, then they'll probably develop things that are not relevant to their customers. Right, these skills may change, but that's what I have for now, and they will change with time. Right, despite all the technical skills used to develop high-quality software, failures have happened and may continue to actually happen. That is software failures. So the most common software problems that result in faults, I've got a list of them. Incorrect calculations, incorrect data edits, incorrect coding of business rules, incorrect interfaces, incorrect matching and merging of data, processing of data relationships, and incorrect file and data handling. Those are some of the list of things that can actually cause software faults. Among them is ineffective data edits, confusing or misleading data that says what it doesn't mean, and inadequate software performance, inadequate security controls, or obsolete, no longer supported software. I know this one, a lot of people are guilty. You hear people say, oh, I love Windows XP, I'm not going to, your employer says, oh, we're upgrading to Windows 10. No, I'm fine with XP. They don't want to move on. And there are people that are still stuck to Windows NT because they believe it was the best operating system that Microsoft ever developed. So the danger, if you are a developer, if you're developing software in that kind of environment, is that you may actually have lots of software faults because of that, because the upgrades are not there. You have to go to certain user groups in order to get those upgrades, and you might get viruses or whatever, and so forth. Right. Inconsistent processing, so that can cause faults as well, and difficult to use and to maintain and to understand software, and unreliable results or performance, inadequate support of business needs or objectives. Right, so let's move on to examples of software failures. Right, those who have studied computer science or at least software engineering would be aware of the classic examples of software failures usually taught and sometimes even written in textbooks. And a good example is the Therac 25, a computer-controlled radiation therapy machine produced by AECL in 1982. In the early 1980s, the AECL machine gave patients radiation doses that were many times above normal, which killed patients or cause serious injuries. And imagine if if your loved one was in the hospital and this happened to them, you would probably be cursing software developers even up to today. And another example is the KCG group, an organization that had a reputation in this industry until the 1st of August 2012, when in 30 minutes, their trading algorithm blundered and bought high and sold low on 150 different stocks. KCG lost $440 million on the trade before the foul-up stopped. This resulted in 62% drop on their stock price in one day. Imagine. I've friends, acquaintances that are investors, and I'm sure they're cringing at that. Imagine if you have a stock that is worth $1 million, and then all of a sudden you are told that, oh, we're sorry, sir, but your stock is now worth $380,000 from 1 million. So that can cause serious problems. Then St. Mary's Mercy Medical Center's hospital patient management system had a glitch that sent messages saying each of the patients who had a procedure done between 25 October and 11 December 2002 had died. It was a blunder, of course, and I'm sure the relatives were very happy to hear that. But imagine if it had been the other way around. Right, on a cool autumn night of September 26, 1983, the Soviet nuclear early warning system Bleeps mistakenly reporting that the USA had launched an attack on the Soviet. This could have started World War III, because in those days, if Russia and the US fought, everyone would actually be involved. Fortunately, the air defense officer on duty that night had a gut feel that the alarm was false. And fortunately, it was indeed false. So, and the world is forever thankful to Lieutenant Colonel Stanley Petrov, who actually saved we said to have saved the world from nuclear war. Right. In 2012, Apple's iOS 6 update got rid of the superior Google Maps platform to introduce the new Apple Maps. It was considered the most embarrassing, least usable piece of software that Apple had ever developed. Their maps took people nowhere. As reported in Talking Points Memos Ideal Lab, the software was missing entries for entire towns. Imagine saying, I want to go maybe to Pretoria, and you enter the details there, and it says there's no place like that. And you think, okay. So it was also giving incorrect locations, and satellite imagery was also obscured by clouds, imagine. So that's how bad it was, and there were many other faults. And then Michigan Department of Corrections, we said Correctional Services because that's what we call it here, granted early release to 23 prisoners due to the computer programming glitch. Prisoners were released 39 to 161 days earlier, imagine. And they consoled themselves by saying, no, it was not dangerous criminals, it was, it was not violent criminals that were released. However, the same cannot be said about California State, who gave non-revocable preference to approximately 450 violent criminals due to a mistake in their computer programs. Right, and then on August 14, 2003, a blackout across 8 US states and Canada affected 50 million people. What caused it? A race condition bug, a condition that occurs when two separate threads of a single operation use the same element of code. Without proper synchronization, the threads tangle and crash the system. The condition resulted in 256 power plants going offline and resulting in disruptions in cellular communication. And guess who survived the communication blockage? And laptop using a dial-up modem. I'm sure some of you are asking, what is that? You don't even know what a dialogue model is. Okay, this is just a simple illustration of a race condition in Ajax. Ajax is used, it's an approach that is used in developing your web applications on JavaScript and XML and so forth. So if you look at the, your H is entered, a search for H is requested at 57.027 milliseconds, and it is returned in 254 milliseconds. And then HE is also entered in a few fractions of a millisecond different at 57.055 milliseconds, and it is returned at 211 milliseconds, after 211 milliseconds. So as you can see from that, the search for HE is actually returned earlier before the one that was entered first. Then that is obviously a problem. So if one character is entered, there is a delay of 500 milliseconds there, and that is causing that problem. So that is just a simple illustration of race condition. We will not mention the NASA Mars Climate Orbiter. That was on its mission to Mars in 1998. It was lost in space after a subcontractor on the engineering team failed to make a single conversion from English units to metric units. The result was the loss of the 125 million US dollar craft. It got fatally close to Mars' surface after attempting to stabilize its orbit too low. And eventually it lost communication, and the engineers believed that it must have crashed somewhere. Right. Those around my age or older will remember the news heading, Patriot missile system timing issue leads to 28 dead. This tragic software blunder occurred on 25 February 1991 during the Gulf War, while the Patriot missile system was largely successful throughout the conflict. It failed to track and intercept a Scud missile that would strike an American barracks. So the software had a delay and failed to track the missile launch in real time. So this gave Iraq's missile the opportunity to strike, leading to the death of 28 US soldiers, and more than 100 people were actually injured. That's a software failure. Now this one, that's a common window that, image that you see, a Windows image that you see most of the time, isn't it? Right, but in this Windows genuine blip, in this case, this is what happened. In 2007, this incorrect flagging of thousands of genuine legal copies of Windows as pirated is said to have occurred after programmers inserted a glitch in the anti-piracy tool. The WGA, according to Microsoft, the mistake arose after a member of the WGA team incorrectly uploaded bug-ridden pre-production software onto the company's servers on a Friday afternoon. Right, you may be wondering who does this kind of work on a Friday afternoon. Right, so this one, I'll let you watch a video clip of this one. It's just 1 minute. On June 4, 1996, an unmanned Ariane 5 rocket launched by the European Space Agency exploded just 40 seconds after liftoff in Kourou, French Guyana. So the rocket was on its first voyage after a decade of development that cost $7 billion. The destroyed rocket and its cargo was valued at $500 million. The cause of the crash, a software error in the internal reference system, in the initial reference system, a 64-bit floating point number relating to the horizontal velocity of the rocket with respect to the platform was converted to a 16-bit signed integer. The number was larger than 32,767, the largest integer storable in a 16-bit signed integer, and thus the conversion actually failed. But okay, this thing is actually not going to be fine. They just pressed the destroy button and it was destroyed. So as we have seen, the consequences of software failure can actually be, they can cost us money, which sometimes we can say we can work and get money, but when it costs life, then that is very bad. It can also cost comfort and many other things that we've spoken about. Right. Then when it comes to liabilities, the issue of liabilities has been discussed and debated for a long time, since the 80s and so forth. But the liabilities actually depend on the laws of the country. And in most cases, a customer may be able to claim negligence of duty by the software developer, but only if they are able to actually relate to prove that the software developer was actually negligent. So it might be a bit of a challenge. And then there are things called software terms and conditions that we don't usually read. Okay, let me see by show of hands those that actually read those things before they install apps on their smartphones. How many people read those? Okay, I can see one or two, and others that sometimes look at that and so forth. And to be honest, if you read that, you'll be scared. You won't install some of the apps. So most people just, if it happens that the accept button is before the conditions, you just accept and go. But if it's after, you run through that and so forth. Right, but those things can actually help us, and they are very important. It's important for them to be read. Now let's look at solutions for software failure. This is where the kind of research that we've been doing comes in. Of course, it is not after the failure. After the failure, where possible, some recourses can be considered as agreed to in the terms and conditions and so forth, or in the contracts if there are any. And for organizations, there could be recovery plans depending on the consequences of the failure itself. So you would need to be aware of the kind of consumer laws that actually help us before you can start that journey. But before the failure, this is more favorable because it costs less. It is usually done through effective management of software quality. Software quality management is one of those activities that are actually done right from the beginning of the software, from initiation of the project. Throughout, every activity that you do must involve software quality management until you deploy the project. So that is very important. So software quality management has three main aspects, three main components. That is quality assurance, quality planning, and quality control. So quality assurance is basically organizational processes that are put in place to meet software development standards. And then quality planning, this is defined at project level, the quality attributes of a project. So those are defined at project level. And then quality control, of course, I think most of us would know that one, because it is the testing and the reviews of software that are done to ensure that quality assurance has actually been met. Now, software quality has two distinct but related aspects. That is functional quality and also structural quality. Functional quality has to do with designing software that meets the functional requirements, and we test that using what is called dynamic testing, and an example of that would be test-driven development. Structural quality is software designed to meet non-functional requirements such as robustness and maintainability, and it is tested using static methods such as inspections, code reviews, walkthroughs, and so forth. Right. Let's look at an example of the dynamic methods that we're talking about. Two techniques that are used in software quality management are test-driven development and JUnit. So test-driven development, as depicted by the name, is about writing better quality code by first thinking through how you want to test that code, and then you actually code. So the testing actually drives the development itself. And in a nutshell, test-driven development is writing just enough code so that it runs, and then think through how you want to test it. And to do this, you write test cases for it, test the cases, and they should actually fail because there's no implementation, and then you write the code until those cases pass. Right. I hope you have your laptops or your devices that you can use, because there's an exercise that you must actually do. It's a lecture. Right. Unit, I hope that you, even if you're not interested in software development, you can think about doing that one. Right, so finally, over the past decade or so, of course for me, over the past decade and a half, but with my students over the past decade, we have contributed to the improvement of software quality, especially in Agile methodologies, which are a group of methodologies used for software development. And recently we've started looking at DevOps as well, which stands for Development and Operations, which basically combines the development teams and the operations into a flawless pipe of software delivery and so forth. Right, so in most cases, my colleagues and friends, they ask me, okay, so now that you're a professor, what's next? Okay, you have the answer today. I'll just do what professors do. In this lecture, you have learned the following, that computing software has greatly improved the quality of our lives today, but it has certain faults. There can be faults, and those faults can happen because of poor quality. In our research that we did earlier when I started research in software engineering, we found that most of the problems, most of the errors and issues that happen in software development are actually due to soft issues, to people issues that Prof was talking about, from social science, things like team dynamics, relationships among the teams and so forth. If those are not okay, even if you have the best technical guys, they won't be able to develop your software properly. You'll have serious issues. And those kind of principles are applicable to any organization, whether you're developing software or not. So if people don't respect each other and they don't work together as a team, then you're bound to have problems. So we've looked at the consequences of poor software quality and examples of software failures. And we also looked at techniques for software quality management, and you had a lesson in test-driven development in that area. Right, okay. So that is all. And to cap it, to ice that, the last thing that I would like to say is that to my Zimbabwean friends,
amazing thing to have such a student who was serious and studious and thought very deeply and contributed as much as he possibly could at every moment. And it's been a real pleasure to work with Professor Mnkandla for well over a decade now, and to see him grow and develop to the point that he's standing here today, presenting this very prestigious lecture. So personally, I feel very proud to be standing here and to be trying, if I can, to respond to his lecture. I think he sort of slightly understated the seriousness of the problem we sit with. So we read about the so-called Fourth Industrial Revolution and the digital age, and we don't pause to think how amazingly pervasive the digital has become. So almost everything that we do, everything that happens in our world is now being filtered through, mediated, dealt with by pieces of software somewhere along the way. And it's quite alarming to think about software quality, and a few examples were put up. And yes, software nearly caused the nuclear war. Software wasted hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, brought companies down, killed cancer patients. So we've seen over the decades the problems that have happened in the past, but there could well be many, many more such problems. And to just give you a flavor for what the numbers look like. So, a good software developer using a traditional language like Java or C++, and working on a software project that lands up in a product out there in the market, we can count how many defects are picked up in the lifetime of that software. And the numbers we read are something in the order of between 2 and 10 defects per 1,000 lines of code. So for every 1,000 lines of computer software out there in the wild, being used to drive this modern digital world, for every 1,000 lines of code, good software probably has something like 2 defects in every 1,000 lines, which kind of sounds not too many till you realize how big software is. So I don't have any sort of modern pieces of software, but the Linux kernel is about 4 million lines of code. That's how big it is. So if you count 2 defects for every 1,000 lines, that code had or has about 8,000 defects in it. You mentioned Windows NT, and Windows NT, which was sort of retired, and then they could do a count of how many defects were found. It was actually excellent software. It had less than 2 defects per 1,000 lines of code, but it was 40 million lines of code big. So that's 80,000 defects were in that code. Some popped up and caused problems. Lots probably were never discovered. They were there somewhere. So we kind of know that because humans write software, or machines now write software, defects do get injected, and there are lots of defects out there. And as you mentioned, there are various ways to get the defects out. We can do exhaustive testing. We can use methods and technologies like test-driven development or special tools for looking for them. But I think it really comes down to the skills that the people have who are responsible for software. So it's where you and I and our colleagues who train the next generation of digital professionals to instill in them the skills that they need to produce quality code. We need to also instill a sense of professionalism, that people realize the risk that their work can put the world at, and how important it is that they have an ethical and professional approach to their life. And I know that you're very strong on that with your students and in your professional life. So I think that the work you're doing is critically important if the digital world, and we can focus on the problems, but we should also focus on the amazing benefits and advantages that the digital has given us. So we bear the risks because we accept the benefits. But we still have to train our young people well and educate them in the kind of techniques you've mentioned. And we have to instill a sense of professionalism, that they really understand that they play more than just a technical role in the world. They are professionals who have an important role to play in the common world. So congratulations to you, Ernest. It's been a privilege working with you. I hope we carry on for many years to go. And also to your colleagues, to the Vice Principal, to the Dean, and to your colleagues here at UNISA. Keep up the good work, and I hope to see you go from strength to strength. Thank you.
And in saying that from our office in particular, we expect more from your work. We look forward to a number of postgraduate students that you shall produce, and for me, as also responsible for postgraduate students, it heartens my soul to see that you work and produce work with your students, and you're still active in supervising your students. And I want to believe that everyone in the House, despite this being a subject that at surface value seems quite hard, but you manage to bring it to the level of everyone, and we could relate to the number of things that you're talking about, and in particular about the digitization, which is very much at the core of what UNISA is about, is an Agile, a university that is being open distance, e-focused in a learning institution. Your reference to, and in the manner in which you structured your lecture, is speaking to me in a manner in which I'm recalling an article I read last week of the fact that Finland is the first country in the world that has abolished subjects. Your work is looking at the fact that we need to be solving problems, to structure solutions around the problems that we experience. And I'm just hoping that as you move along this path, probably you shall be assisting us to innovatively think of as a country, as a university, and particularly as the continent, and probably as the world globally, given the university's strategic focus of internationalizing UNISA, that you lead us to that direction, because indeed, your colleagues will agree that it is only in information that solves the challenges that we have on a daily basis that we will be able to generate data, information that makes sense. We want to be able to come up with solutions and innovations that relate to the challenges of even the daily basis as you wake up, as you go to the office, the challenges that you come across as you do your work and all of that. And listening to your inaugural lecture, it gives me hope that you are on the path that I've just learned. Those who are in education will probably know that Finland is applauded as one of the key countries, if not the country, in the world that's leading in terms of its education, and the fact that it's abolishing subjects and rather arranging information and teaching its students from kindergarten around the challenges that people come across. And if you think about it, it's actually challenges that we want to solve in our daily life. But for us, it is far removed from now in terms of how our basic education is structuring our education. And I am very heartened to find that your work is along those lines, and I'm hoping and expecting a lot from you. My office shall be looking, and please keep us posted through your dean as well in this regard.